Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's virtual field trip to the Turtle Hospital in Florida. My name is Joe Grabowski. For those who don't know, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is all about bringing science, adventure, and conservation into classrooms across North America and beyond. And we have a great group of classrooms joining us today. In fact, we have 8 classrooms joining us from all over North America, and we'll introduce them when we get to the Q&A section. But for now, I'd like to introduce Teresa. So Teresa Ryan, she has her degree in marine biology. She's been an educator at the Turtle Hospital for 4 years now. And before that, she was a volunteer for 10 years doing sea turtle nesting in Northeast Florida. So she's really excited to be here. And I mean, once you guys get a look at this venue, it's a beautiful spot, and the guests that we're meeting today are just beautiful creatures. So Teresa, thanks so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. So basically, we're a sea turtle hospital. We're located down in the Florida Keys, which is the string of islands down at the very base of Florida. And so we take care of sick and injured sea turtles. And so some of our turtles, like Dottie here, she's a juvenile green sea turtle. And so the green sea turtles get their name, not because they're actually green, because she's not green, she's brown, but because they're mainly vegetarian. So in the wild, they eat things like seagrass and algae. While they're here, they eat romaine lettuce, kale, green peppers, green stuff. And they eat so much green stuff that their fat turns green. So it's kind of like you are what you eat. And so she's a juvenile. She's only about 6 pounds, just a few years old. She actually stranded a little bit further north in Florida, up near Daytona Beach. Because every year the greens, or at least the juvenile greens, they strand up there because they just get very weak and exhausted surviving the colder winter. So it's not really that they're sick, they're just tired. And so the facility up there, Volusia Marine Science Center, they got so many turtles, they couldn't take care of all of them, so they kind of shipped a few of the turtles down south. So that's how we got Dottie. But at this point, she's been here just about a month. She's building her strength up. She's eating on her own. She's doing awesome. So hopefully just another few more weeks, and then she'll be able to be released. And so some of the turtles are like Dottie. Some of the turtles are like shark bait. So this is shark bait. He got his name because he's missing his left front flipper. We're thinking he might have gotten bit by a shark. There's no real way of knowing. It's not like we can ask the turtle. And so they can survive perfectly fine with only 3 flippers in the wild. They're just going to look a little bit odd, just like a 3-legged dog. So he's just a little bit weak. He's still got some breakfast he hasn't eaten yet, so he's still got some lettuce. But that's okay. So we don't know yet how long we'll need to keep him. He only came in over the weekend. But he's doing very well so far. But that wound is completely healed, so it's been at least a few weeks or a month or so since that flipper's been gone. But he's been healing up very, very nicely since then. So we get a lot of the green sea turtles. That's what's most common throughout the Florida Keys. The other common species that we get are the Loggerheads. So this is Bubbles. So she's about 130-pound loggerhead, and they get their name because they have a very, very large head. It's a lot bigger than the green sea turtles. And so Bubbles came in because she was found floating. And so floating in a sea turtle is not good because they eat at the bottom, they sleep at the bottom, they do everything at the bottom. So when they are stuck up at the top, there's not much they can do. And so Bubbles is floating because she has what we call an impaction. So loggerheads are carnivores, so they eat lots of crabs, lobsters, conch, things with a hard shell. And so if they eat too much of the shell and not enough of the meat, that'll get stuck in their intestines. It'll block them up, make it very difficult for them to poop. But they'll also have a tendency to eat things that they're not supposed to. Things like trash, plastic, balloons, plastic bags, you name it. If it's right in front of them, they'll eat it. And so that will also get stuck. And so when they first come in, we do x-rays and we draw blood to figure out what's wrong with them, because she looks perfect from the outside. And so in the x-rays, we saw that she had that big blockage in her intestines. So we give them medications to help them poop and to help get rid of their gas. And because when she first came in, she was floating a little bit sideways, which isn't very comfortable, we attached some Velcro strips to the side of her shell, so that white strip is, so that way we could add a foam block, kind of like a float, just to make it a little bit more comfortable for her. And then as she starts passing that impaction, as she starts pooping, getting rid of that gas, she'll starting floating different directions, so we've removed the floats for now because she's doing okay. But most impacted turtles are here for about 2 to 3 months, because it takes them a little while longer, because their body systems run a little bit slower than ours do. But 2 to 3 months is still relatively short. Sometimes when they have especially damage to the outside of their shell, let's see if Ellie is awake. We're going to have to come back to Ellie. She's currently taking a nap. Okay, we'll do Hunter then. So Hunter, he's one of our larger turtles. He's about 200 pounds. So he's a loggerhead. He's got that massive head. And Hunter came in a few months ago because he had a lung infection. He also has some very shallow boat strike wounds on the back of his shell. Kind of looks like he's been scratched. So what we're thinking happened is that he came up for a breath of air, kind of got grazed by that boat, and it pushed him under the water. So he might have inhaled some of that water, which is what caused the lung infection, caused the pneumonia. But after a couple months of medications, he's no longer floating. That lung infection is all cleared up. We just have to keep them off medications for at least a few weeks, make sure that they really are completely healthy, that it's not just the meds masking his symptoms, and then he'll be able to be released. He's just huge. His shell is, what, 3 feet long? It's about 200 pounds, which is still good size for a loggerhead, but it's still not fully grown. Loggerheads will get to be up to about 400 pounds. Because sea turtles are pretty cool. They never stop growing. So for people, you're going to hit adulthood, you're as tall as you're ever going to get. Sea turtles are not that way. So the older the turtle, the larger they are. And that's really the only way that you can guesstimate their age, is based off of their size. Because they don't have growth rings like a tree. So because Hunter here is about 200 pounds, shell's about 3 feet long, we're estimating him to be between like 40 to 50 years old. So, pretty old turtle. Now, that being said, when the smaller turtles, we know that they're a lot younger as well. So this is little Nemo. So he's a baby green sea turtle. So he hatched out last summer. So he's about 6 or 7 months old. So he's tiny. And he got the name Nemo because he has a little flipper. Now for him, we're assuming it was a fish that nibbled on him, not really a shark, because if it was a shark, the shark would have eaten all of him. Because little Nemo is tiny. And so he's doing awesome. That flipper is now completely healed. We're just testing him out now in slightly different, like deeper waters, so that way we can make sure that he really does do okay, that he's continuing to do well, and then hopefully another month or so he'll be able to be released. Okay. Do we want to do a couple questions? Come on.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I'll introduce the classrooms, and we'll grab one each from the classrooms, and then, yeah, we can go from there. So let's bring up my screen. So let's introduce the classrooms. We have a great group from different areas joining us. We've got Mrs. Edgar's group, some grade 4s joining us from Hutchinson, Kansas. Mrs. McLaren's got some, I believe, some 3-4s joining us in Orangeville. Mrs. Martin's got some kindergartens joining us in Brampton, Ontario. Mr. Cameron's got a group joining us over their lunch hour from Thunder Bay, Ontario. I believe they're grade 5-6. And then he wants me to give a shout out to Mrs. Martin's grade 1s who are watching along as well via the YouTube. We've got Mrs. Caesar's group joining us from Prince George in British Columbia, and their grade 6 class. I see them waving. Over here we've got some grade 6, 7s, and some 7s joining us in Guelph, Ontario. There they are. And then we've got Mrs. Murray's group. I believe they're grade 2s joining us from Illinois. So we've got an awesome group of classes joining us today. So let's kick things off right away with our kindergartens.
Kindergarten.
If you guys have a question, go ahead.
Okay, I'm muted. Yeah. So Jasmine, ask you a question. How did turtles? Stand up.
Come on, Jasmine, nice and loud.
Nice and
Sorry,
loud.
we got some nervous kinders.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
How do turtles get to the hospital?
Okay. Well, the great thing about us is that we are located right on the ocean. It's a great thing about living on an island. And so the keys themselves are about 100 miles long. And so we can't patrol all of the keys ourselves. So we rely on the boaters and the fishermen, the people that are already out there on the water, to keep an eye out. So that way, if they see a turtle that doesn't look quite right, they call us. And then we have an ambulance, and we go pick the turtle up. So very similar, like if you were to get sick.
All right, great question. BC, grade 6s, do you guys have a question?
Okay, Colin? How many turtles can you take in the hospital? How many turtles can you take care of at once in the hospital?
Well, that kind of depends on the turtles. We don't really have a max number. So when the turtles first come in, they're in their own individual tanks. That's what we're seeing. And they're getting some blood at the moment from this little guy. And so we only have a limited number of individual tanks, but once they start feeling better and they're getting ready to be released, then they go, we have a 100,000 gallon tidal pool. So at the moment we have 66 turtles, but we still have empty tanks. So even though 66 is a lot of turtles, we're still not completely full yet.
All right, great question. Grade 2s, Mrs. Murray's class. Do you guys have a question?
How old do the turtles get?
Well, their average lifespan is about 80 to 100 years. So a lot of these turtles will outlive us.
All right, heading to Kansas. Mrs. Ediger.
How do you know when a turtle is ready to go back into the ocean?
Well, we determine based on how they're behaving. Because it's not like we can ask the turtle how they're feeling that day. So we see how they're swimming. Let's see. That's little Gracie right there. She's swimming awesome. She has no problem getting around. She originally came in with tumors. So little growths on their neck, around their flippers. So they have to stay tumor-free for a full year. And so it's been a year now. She's almost ready. I think she's got another few more weeks to a month left. So we go based off of that. For turtles like sharkbait or dottie, we just have to make sure that they're eating on their own, that they're eating consistently well, and that they're swimming well, that they're not getting tired. And then we do a final blood draw. So we test their blood one final time, make sure that that is good, because that'll tell us if they have any underlying problems, like an infection or something.
Okay, grade 3-4s, Mrs. McLaren, your mic's on.
Okay. Riley, do you want to just call it out? Okay. What is the biggest turtle that you have got?
The biggest turtle we have at the moment, his name is Rebel. He's currently sleeping. So that big blob down there underneath the water that kind of looks like a rock, that's not a rock. That's a turtle. They like to think that if they hide their heads and that they can't see us, that we can't see them. So that's kind of his spot. He's about a 230-pound loggerhead. So he's just a little bit bigger than Hunter. But 90% of the time, if Rebel is not up swimming around, that's where he'll be. That's where he likes to sleep. Which they can hold their breath up to about 5 hours at a time. So he might be down there for a while.
All right, you just turn on the mic for Mr. Cameron's class. Oh, I'm going to need you guys to do that for me. For some reason, I can't reach yours on my screen. If you can just turn the mic on for me.
Hi, my name is Cooper, and I'm asking a question for the St. Martin grade 1s. And one of their questions is, are any of the turtles endangered?
Well, they're all endangered. So there's 7 different species of sea turtles throughout the entire world, and all of them are considered an endangered species. Now, the 5 that we get around Florida, most of them are the loggerheads and the greens, and then a little bit more critically endangered are the leatherbacks, the Kemps, Ridleys, and the hawksbills. So the leatherbacks are the really, really large turtles. They get to be up to about 2,000 pounds. But because they're so large, they don't like to live near shore. They like to live way out in the middle of the ocean, so we don't see them very often. And then we only have 1 Kemp's Ridley and 1 hawksbill right now, because they're critically endangered, so they are pretty rare. So you only get just a few of those turtles every year. Which our hawksbill was Ellie. She was the one that was sleeping. We'll go back to her later and see if she's woken up yet. And then our Kemp's Ridley, her name is Bender. She's one of our permanent residents, actually. She hangs out in the big pool here. But she's kind of stubborn and shy, so she does not always come up to say hi. She typically likes to sleep right underneath the big buoy there, down at the very bottom. But I'll keep an eye out. If she decides to come up, I'll point her out, because she's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we have 9 classes joining us today with the grade 1s who are joining. So that 5-6 class, is there a question from one of you guys that you want to ask while I have you with the microphone on?
Okay, me. We're up, Mr. J.
Yeah, we'll grab one from one of your students.
Absolutely.
Hello, my name is Mason, and I would like to know, are your employees volunteers?
We are full-time staff right now, but a lot of the different turtle facilities do take volunteers. So like half of our staff are the educators, so we're the ones that get to teach everybody, and we are open to the public, so we give groups of the public coming around. So if you're ever down in the Keys, you're more than welcome to visit these guys in person. And then the other half of our staff are the rehabbers, so like the turtle nurses. And then all of us typically have some type of background, some type of degree in something science related, whether it's marine biology, biology, zoology, something like that. And then of course, a passion for turtles.
All right. Well, we visited all of our classrooms once. Actually, let me see if there's a question in my room. Does anybody want to come up and ask? Peyton, come on up.
What's your favorite turtle?
They're all my favorite. It's hard to pick just one. Like the Nemo's cute because he's tiny. Hunter's cool because he's huge. Even the turtles that won't really be here for that long, like Dottie, they're still pretty awesome. Like this guy here, this is Montel. He's one of our permanent residents. So most of the turtles, our goal is to get them healthy and release them. But if once we get them healthy, they can't survive on their own anymore in the wild, then they become a permanent resident. So that means they just get to stay in captivity. And so Montel here, he's had a rough life. He's been hit by a boat, bit by a shark, entangled in fishing line, and he's had those tumors. So he's missing half of his right front flipper, all of his left front flipper, his right eye, and his shell is dented there on the left side. So he's had a rough life, but he's completely healthy now. But missing 1.5 flippers and an eye, he's just not very fast because he has to use his rear flippers for everything. And sea turtles, they primarily use their front flippers for propulsion. That's what makes them go. And then they use their rear flippers like a rudder. So that's what helps them turn. But because little Montel only has half of a front flipper left, he uses his rear flippers for everything. So he's just not fast, which would be a problem if he was in the wild. But in here, he doesn't have to worry about boats or sharks or anything like that.
All right. Well, it sounds like he had some bad luck to start, but his luck changed. We ended up there, somewhere a little bit safer.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, we've visited all our classrooms to start. Do you want to maybe share one or two more stories, and we'll do another round of questions?
Sure. Okay, so most of our other permanent residents that we have, they have what we call bubble butt syndrome. And so it's what happens when they sometimes get hit by that boat and air gets trapped underneath their shell. And so because that air is stuck underneath their shell, they float. And so the turtle can't get the air out. We can't get the air out. So they're going to permanently float. So that's what little George, one here in the middle, he's got bubble butt. And so to make them a little bit more comfortable in captivity, we attach lead weight to the outside of that shell to kind of help even out their buoyancy a little bit. But eventually their weight will fall off, and then they're back to floating. So even with the weight, they still cannot be released. And so it's named Bubble Butt Syndrome after Mr. Bubblebutt, who is in this pool somewhere. He's another turtle that likes to be a little bit more stubborn. But the great thing about having such a large pool as this, there's Kent. Kent's pretty cool. It's about a 150-pound green sea turtle. He's got bubble butt. But this big pool is actually connected to the ocean through a grate. So it is tidal, so it rises and falls with the tides. And there's little fish that are in here that can come in and out through the grate. And it has a natural rocky sandy bottom, just like the ocean. So it's great for the turtles that are permanent residents, because it gives them sort of a taste of home, a bit more natural of a pool. And then it's great for the turtles that we are getting ready to be released, because it gives them a chance to kind of reacclimate to the wild instead of just dumping them out in the ocean. But they do pretty well. And even though sea turtles are solitary in the wild, so they don't travel in groups, that's why they're okay being all by themselves in a hospital tank for months at a time. Even when you do put them together like these guys, they don't care. They ignore each other, so they'll steal food from each other, they'll knock into each other. They don't hurt each other, not really. They'll just occasionally smack each other or run into each other. But that's okay. The only ones that ever do get a little bit more feistier are the loggerheads. Because the greens, they're vegetarian. They're pretty laid back. But because the loggerheads, they are the carnivores, you have to keep them separated. So like Rebel, remember the blob that's sleeping? He's our only loggerhead in this big pool. Because if we tried to put him with another loggerhead, we've got little Charlie, well, little, he's about 110 pounds. So Charlie's down there sleeping underneath the fence. If we tried to put Rebel and Charlie together, they would fight. But Charlie's another one of our permanent resident loggerheads. He also has bubble butt. So we're actually trying to find a new home for Charlie, because it's really the only way for zoos or aquariums to get sea turtles, because you're not allowed to take them out of the wild population anymore. That's why when you go to your local zoo or aquarium, the turtle looks a little bit odd, but that's okay. Gives them, the turtle, a chance for a nice life, and it gives another chance for people to learn all about the turtles. You gonna come over to say hi, Charlie? You're just gonna hang out there in the middle. Sea turtles can be very stubborn when they want to be. But Charlie's a nice loggerhead. He's got a nice big head. And loggerheads are typically a little bit more yellowish orange rather than the green sea turtles. Yeah, that's Charlie. And I'll show you what some of our tumor turtles look like. Because I've been telling you about the tumors. You probably have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is water. And it's typically the people that find our turtles that get to name them. That's why sometimes our turtles have very odd names. But this is water. He's another juvenile green sea turtle. And he has all of those little growths all over his neck, his flippers, his eyes. And those are tumors. They're caused by water pollution, because these green sea turtles eat seagrass. And so seagrass are kind of the natural filters for the ocean, just like trees in the air. And so they kind of take in the polluted water, release slightly cleaner water, and then these turtles come and eat the polluted seagrass, which then causes them to get sick. And so we do surgery. We remove those tumors. So eventually, little water will look like Chica. Chica's currently tumor-free. Chica's been here for, what, pretty much a month now. He came in with a 2-pound tumor attached to the side of his head. So it was the size of his head. So he's still healing from that. But he's doing awesome. He feels a lot better now that he doesn't have that tumor on the side of his head. But they have to stay tumor-free for that full year. We have to make sure that those tumors are not going to regrow. Because if they do regrow while they're here, we can just do surgery, remove them again. But because those tumors grow on the soft tissues, so their neck, their flippers, their eyes, it makes it very hard for them to eat or to swim when they have tumors. And then eventually, those guys, Blinky's tumor-free now. He's been tumor-free for about 2 weeks. So he's starting to build his strength back up, and he's starting to be awesome. And then give him another few weeks to a month or so, and then he'll be able to go with the other turtles. But when they still have tumors or just recently tumor-free, we like to keep them isolated. And then I'll show you some of our little babies. Because nesting season is May through October. So there's no babies from this year yet. They haven't started nesting yet. So we've got some babies from last year. They get considered post-hatchlings and then juveniles. So whereas Nemo, the little guy with the 3 flippers from earlier, the little guy, he was a baby green, about 6 months old. Here we have Copper and we have Bowser. These guys are about 8-month-old loggerheads. So when they'll grow up, they're going to look like Hunter, Bubbles, Charlie. But these guys came in because they get stuck at the bottom of their nest in some roots. And so when that happens, they're not sick, they just get very weak. So then they get to come here. And we'll typically keep them till they build their strength back up, just about a month, and then we release them. But every year we try to keep 1 or 2 of them as part of our Head Start program. So that means that we'll keep them for about 3 years till they hit a certain size, and then we'll release them. So that way they have a much better chance of survival because they'll be quite a bit bigger. Not as many things will want to eat them. Because when they're this little, like this is Copper. He's only 8 months old. He's still just a little baby. So at this point, he's still easy prey for everything. He's just super cute and adorable. Okay. I'm going to do some more questions.
Absolutely, and I should give a shout out to some more classrooms who have kind of reached out via Twitter and the event page. So I know Mr. So's group's watching, Mrs. Dwarf's group's watching along in Illinois. We have Mrs. Bennett's, I believe they're grade 1s who are watching along. Mrs. Dillon's class looks like they're watching along in Farmington. And then in Michigan, Mrs. Ballou's class is watching along as well. So lots of classrooms today, Teresa.
Very cool.
Who are joining in. But let me grab one from the event page. So I have a question here. And they're wondering, let's see. So this one's wondering, this is Mrs. Dillon's class, and they're wondering if you have any soft-shelled species there, or if they're all the hard-shelled sea turtles.
Well, most soft-shell turtles are freshwater turtles. So like sea turtles, they typically have a hard shell. The only ones that really don't are the leatherbacks, which their shell isn't really soft. It's more cartilage than bone. So it's softer than a loggerhead shell, but it's not soft like us. And the main difference between like sea turtles and freshwater turtles, like if you're just looking at them, is to look at their feet. Because sea turtles are made to swim. The only time they're ever on land is when they're first being born, when they're hatching, or during nesting. But that's only if they're a girl. The rest of the time, they're in the water. So sea turtles are built to swim. That's why they have that flipper. And then freshwater turtles, the turtles that live like in your ponds, rivers, lakes, those guys have to come up out of the water to sunbathe. So they'll have a webbed foot with a little claw at the tip of each little toe. And then you also have your land turtles. So like your box turtles, your tortoises. Those guys spend their entire lives on land. They cannot swim. So they have an actual foot. So if you ever do find a turtle, you don't know where they're supposed to live, look at their feet. And fun fact, sea turtles cannot pull their heads and flippers inside their shell like a box turtle can. Their heads and their flippers are always out. So to protect themselves, they'll kind of do like Copper's doing right now. They'll kind of tuck their front flippers on their back and their rear flippers underneath. So that way if you're a turtle, kind of cruising around looking for a turtle to eat, you won't bite Copper because he doesn't look like a turtle. He just kind of looks like a blob.
All right, so we'll visit our classrooms who are joining us live on screen. As well, if any classrooms after their questions do have to duck out, feel free to. But let's go to our kindergartens, who we started with last time. So Mrs. Martin's group, you have another question.
How do we take
What?
how do we take turtles safe?
How do we make turtles safe?
Yes. How do we keep turtles safe? How do we make turtles
Okay.
safe?
Well, an easy way is to not litter. Because if we don't litter, then that trash is not going to end up in the ocean. So these turtles won't eat it or get entangled in it. And one thing that a lot of people don't always think about are balloons or plastic bags. Because if you let a balloon go into the air, it has to come down somewhere. And a lot of times it does that over the ocean. And think about it. What does a balloon or a plastic bag look like floating in the water? They look like jellyfish. And so these turtles eat it, thinking that it's food, and then it gets stuck and it makes them sick. So that's a really easy thing that you can do no matter where you live, whether you're on the ocean or on the coast or in Kansas. Everything ends up in the ocean eventually.
All right, jumping to BC with our grade 6s.
Have you ever had all 7 species of turtles in the hospital?
Nope, because only 5 of the species are found around us. So like the 6 and 7 species, the olive ridleys, those are only typically found in the Pacific Ocean. And then the Australian flatbacks are only found near Australia. So it would be very, very weird, very, very rare for us to get all 7 species.
All right, grade 2s, Mrs. Murray.
Can the shells on the turtles ever fall off?
The shell is a part of them. So it's just like bones in you. Can you live without your bones? Same thing with the turtles. So the shell is a part of them. So as they grow up, when that shell is damaged, like they get hit by a boat, they develop a scar. That's okay. It heals, but they'll just now always have a scar down the middle of their back.
All right. Kansas, Mrs. Edgar.
Of course they do. Good job, bud.
How do you find her turtles?
Well, we rely on the boaters, the fishermen, the people out there on the water to keep an eye out. So that way when they find a turtle, they just call us. So that way we don't actually have to go out onto the ocean and start finding them. That's a very large ocean out there.
All right, Mrs. McLaren.
Which one of your turtles got hurt the most?
That would probably be Mr. Montel, the guy in the big pool that had kind of everything happen to him. He was one of our worst turtles, but that kind of varies. It all depends on what turtles we have. Every year we typically get about 100 turtles, so we could get in a turtle tomorrow. That's even worse shape. Okay, and then this guy, this is Mr. Bubblebutt. He finally popped up. So I was telling you about the permanent residents and how they have that floating problem called Bubblebutt. Well, it's named after that guy right next to the wall. That's Mr. Bubblebutt. He is our longest resident. He's been here since 1989. And so he's also another good version of the fact that even though their shells heal, they never regenerate. Because he was a little turtle when he got hit by that boat. He was only about 25 pounds. So his shell is healed, but it's just now deformed. Because it was a very large boat that hit him and it deformed his shell when he was little. So now he's just growing with it.
All right. Mr. Cameron's class, I'm going to have to get you to turn the mic on for me because for whatever reason, I can't control yours today.
My question is, has a turtle that you have released before ever come back in worse condition than it was already in before?
Well, we've been here for 30 years. We've opened in 1986. And in that 30 years, we've only actually had 2 turtles ever return. One of them was a few years ago. Her name was Sapphire, which first time she came in was because of a boat strike. Second time she came in because she had eaten trash. And then our second turtle was Mr. Hunter, which I'll go back up to Hunter. He's the one that just came in with the lung infection a couple months ago. But the first time he came in was about 2 years ago because he had swallowed fish hooks. So it's not very common that we get turtles that return for one thing, and it's not typically for the same problems. But we do tag them when they get released. So this is Hunter again. He's our 200-pound turtle. So he came in, and when we saw him the second time, we didn't recognize him. He had grown a little bit, but he had tags. So everybody gets flipper tags, little metal tags on the backside of each front flipper with a number engraved on it. So that way, if they do pop up anywhere else throughout the world, we know exactly who they are. And then they also get a microchip into the back of their neck, just like microchipping your dog.
We watched Hunter's first release.
Yeah. Which, typically, that's the last we see of these turtles. And really, that's what we want to happen. We want them to be released and us never to see them again. Because we don't want to see them sick again. It's not fun for us. That's not fun for the turtle.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, and just checking the event page, we have a few more classrooms giving a shout out. So got Mrs. Curtis's group joining us. They're our first grade class. And we have Mrs. Proctor's group joining us as well. So they're from North Carolina. And they have a question. They're wondering if you ever track the turtles after the release.
Well, tracking them is a little bit more difficult because you have to do a satellite tag. So it's a much larger tag. I'm trying to think of what it's a little bit bigger than a Twinkie. So it gets actually glued to the very back of their shell. So that means you can't do it on the smaller turtles because it'll outweigh them. You can only do it on larger turtles. And they are pretty expensive, so a couple $1,000s per tag. So we typically only do maybe 1 turtle every year.
All right, and another question from the event page from, there we go, from Mrs. Curtis's group. They're wondering, what's the smallest turtle you've ever had?
Well, our smallest turtle at the moment is little Nemo. Which, come here, Nemo. So this is little Nemo. So at the moment, he's our smallest, because he's only about 6 months old. But the smallest that we ever get would be the little hatchlings, because it's when they're first born. When they're first born, they're only about 2 to 3 inches long. But they don't typically start hatching till basically July, because nesting season is May through October, and then it typically takes about 50 to 60 days for them to hatch. So Nemo will be our smallest for a little bit.
All right, a couple more shout-outs from the event page. We got Miss Bird's grade 1s joining us. It looks like from Missouri. Then we have some 4th graders joining us. Mrs. Bailey's group from Park Ridge, Illinois. And let's see, there is another question here. And they're just wondering, so the baby turtles, they're wondering if you help them if they're already in the ocean, and then maybe a sub-question there too, do you ever have the hatchlings there? So do you just kind of take them from the nests, or do they, do you ever have eggs incubating there?
Okay, well, mainly throughout the Keys, what we have nesting are the Loggerheads. We'll occasionally get some greens or a Hawksbill, but they're pretty rare. Primarily it's loggerheads, and Florida is one of the top 2 nesting beaches in the world for loggerheads. So their population is doing okay. So we do, or at least there's a volunteer nesting group throughout the Keys that go out and mark the nest, and they'll protect the nest. But other than that, we kind of let Mother Nature take over. We only help the babies when they don't make it to the ocean on their own. So either they get stuck at the bottom of their nest, like Bowser and Copper did, or they get disoriented, so they walk towards land instead of towards the water. But otherwise, we let Mother Nature take it and let the babies get out to the water on their own.
Okay, and maybe we'll do one final question from here. We have Lauren joining us.
How do turtles sleep at night?
Well, you know how I was showing you Rebel sleeping underneath that rock? That's how they sleep. They go stick their head, or their front half of their body, up underneath a rock, and they sleep. So that way they stay nice and protected, because remember, they can't pull their heads and their flippers inside their shell, so that way they can protect their head by sticking it underneath the rock. And then they just sleep, and they can hold their breath up to about 5 hours. So they don't always have the same schedules that we do. It's not like sun is up, they're awake, sun goes down, they go to sleep. They're going to sleep as long as they want to, as long as they can hold their breath, and then they'll wake up and either swim around some, they might eat, or they might go back down and go back to sleep.
All right. So just on that sleeping topic, I know some marine species can kind of shut off parts of their brains at different times, so they're still kind of alert. Do sea turtles, do they do that, or do they go right to a good solid sleep?
Nope, they're like that too, because they are conscious breathers. So animals that live in water but have lungs, they can't just breathe automatically. So even when they're sleeping, they're not sleeping like we're sleeping. They're going to sleep like marine mammals, so like dolphins and whales. They're going to shut off enough of their brain that they're resting, but not enough that they forget to hold their breath.
All right. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for this today, introducing us to the turtles, sharing some of their stories, and letting all these classrooms get a peek into the Florida Keys and what you do at the Turtle Hospital. We had an amazing group today, hundreds of students joining from all over North America. What I do want to share, just while we are still online together, is that it is possible to adopt turtles for the year at the Turtle Hospital. So there's 5 permanent residents: April, Bender, Bubblebutt, Montel, and Rebel. And we did get to meet a few of them. So you get a certificate when you do adopt, so it's $35 for the year, with pictures and a thank you letter and a magnet. And then looks like every 4 months you get a letter with an update about the turtles and what's happening around the Turtle Hospital. So that would be an amazing way to give back as a classroom to help out the wonderful conservation work happening at the Turtle Hospital. And what I'll do in just a moment, Teresa, is I'm going to turn on all the microphones, give the classrooms a chance to say goodbye and thank you. So it's going to get loud. But I definitely want to just take one more moment to thank you. It was amazing today. Looks like an absolutely beautiful day down there, and your facility is beautiful as well.
Well, we're here to take care of the turtles, and the turtles are beautiful.
All right, so microphones are on. If everybody wants to say goodbye and thank you, here we go. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks so much, Teresa. We're signing off for today.
You're welcome.